The Constitution of India was adopted on January 26, 1950, which is the supreme law of the land and serves as the foundation for the governance and functioning of the country. It combines elements from different countries, legal systems, and historical documents to create a unique framework that governs the world's largest democracy. Here are some of the sources from which the Indian Constitution derives its principles and features. The first is the Government of India Act, 1935. The Government of India Act, 1935, served as a significant source for the Indian Constitution. It provided a foundation for the structure and functioning of the government, including federal provisions, provincial autonomy, and legislative powers. Next is the United Kingdom. India's colonial past under British rule influenced several aspects of the Indian Constitution. It adopted parliamentary democracy, the rule of law, the bicameral system, and concepts such as the fundamental rights and the independence of the judiciary from the UK's constitutional framework. The third is United States of America. The Indian Constitution drew inspiration from the US Constitution in various ways. It incorporated the concepts of fundamental rights, an independent judiciary, and a written constitution. The idea of a federal structure with a strong central government was also influenced by the US model. Next we come on to Canada. The Indian Constitution borrowed the principles of federalism from the Canadian system. It adapted the distribution of powers between the central government and the states, the appointment of governors, and the idea of a single citizenship for the entire country from Canada. Ireland. The concept of directive principles of state policy, which outline the socio-economic goals of the Indian government, was inspired by the Irish Constitution. The Indian Constitution also adopted the idea of a nomination of members to the Rajya Sabha, upper house, from the Irish model. Australia. The Indian Constitution derived the provision of concurrent lists, which allow both the central and state governments to legislate on certain matters, from the Australian Constitution. The idea of a concurrent list ensures cooperation and coordination between the different levels of government. France. The Indian Constitution drew inspiration from the French Revolution and the French Constitution in the inclusion of the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity. The concept of the Republic, the principles of secularism, and the idea of a constitutional amendment procedure were influenced by France. Germany. The Indian Constitution drew inspiration from the German Constitution, Basic Law, in terms of the provision for a fundamental rights chapter. The concept of a basic structure doctrine, which upholds the essential features of the Constitution and limits the power of amendment, was also influenced by the German Constitutional Court's jurisprudence. Japan. The principle of the procedure established by law, which emphasizes that any deprivation of life, liberty, or property must be done in accordance with established legal procedures, was derived from the Japanese legal system. South Africa. The concept of the directive principles of state policy, which focus on social and economic justice, was influenced by the South African Constitution. The Indian Constitution also took inspiration from South Africa's approach to affirmative action and social welfare. Switzerland. The Indian Constitution borrowed the idea of a rigid and detailed written constitution, as well as the concept of a federal system, from the Swiss model. The features of a bicameral legislature and the idea of a president as the head of state were also influenced by Switzerland. Russia. The provision of the fundamental duties of citizens, which emphasizes the responsibilities of individuals towards the nation and society, was influenced by the Russian Constitution. Last is ancient Indian texts. The Indian Constitution also drew inspiration from ancient Indian texts, such as the Arthashastra by Chanakya and the Manusmriti, in areas related to governance, administration, and legal principles. Concepts like the rule of law, the idea of justice, and principles of governance found in ancient texts such as the Arthashastra, Manusmriti, and Vedas influenced the framing of the constitution. Indigenous legal and cultural heritage. The Constitution of India also drew upon India's rich indigenous legal and cultural heritage. It is important to note that while these sources influenced the Indian constitution, the framers also took into consideration India's unique socio-political context and the aspirations of its diverse population. The Constitution of India reflects the vision of its framers to establish a democratic, egalitarian, and pluralistic society that upholds the principles of justice, liberty, equality, and fraternity.